there. Bud, you're messing with my computer right now. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday, Miss Deborah. Hello, hello. Cat, leave my computer alone. I hope everyone's had a great week so far. I am so sorry that I missed Tuesday. I lost track of time. Before I realized it, it was like 8:30 and I'm like, oh my God, it's Tuesday and I need to be reading a book. That's okay. Okay, good. So I'm synced. You can hear me. I'm not echoing. Everything sounds fine. Hi, Ishmael. Hi, Holly. Yeah, give me some indication that... Okay, good. Everything sounds good. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Sir, I can't. I can't with you. I just can't. God. All right, so we are going to, for anyone who's just joining us, we are reading from Leonardo Swans this evening by Karen Essex, and we're almost done with the book. But if you'd like to catch up on the previous readings, they're on my YouTube page. I have them listed in numerical order, so you can just go one right after the other and see some of the other stuff that I've got on there. But for now, you know, it's mostly my main content that I do on my YouTube page or my TikTok, but also the book readings. So, without further ado, because it's 8:05, and I may not go for the whole 90 minutes tonight. I'm starting to notice that my eyes are getting really tired about an hour and 15-ish minutes into it, so I'm going to try and do the whole 90, but just in case I can't, y'all been warned. All right. She asked Andrea Montenegro for a painting of such and such dimensions to cover a certain space on a certain wall in the studiolo, and requested that he make it of some classical theme. Well, what do you think the old man came up with? He's making a painting of the 9 muses on Mount Parnassus. And who do you think is the golden-haired muse in the dead center of the painting? It's our own Isabella, in her pregnant state, dancing among the others. She is more beautiful than Venus, who presides over the painting. She is more beautiful than Venus, Beatrice says. Finally, someone has painted her as what she is, a muse. Oh yes, she inspires everyone, he says. If I were a jealous man, I would already have killed dozens of poets and painters and courtiers. Beatrice does not even attempt to stifle her laugh. But, Marquis, you are a jealous man. So I am. Perhaps we should take a moment to reflect upon my self-restraint. After all the guests have departed and the Duke and his Duchess are alone, Ludovico wants to know what Beatrice and Francesco had been discussing with such liveliness. She tells him about Isabella being painted as a muse. Good, then she will stop pestering us over Magister Leonardo. At least for a while, he answers. Montenegro is a genius, too. I hope he can slake her thirst. Beatrice has never known Ludovico to make any comment about her sister in less than glowing terms, and wonders why he is speaking of her in a snide tone now. Did you speak to your brother-in-law on any matters of importance? He asks. I thought my sister's health and state of mind were important, she answers. The Marquis is a short little prig, and I wish to God that we did not require his services, Ludovico exclaims. He would not even speak to me of the confrontation with the French. I suppose he thinks he is employed solely by the Venetians, and not by me. Does he know whose money is filling his pockets? Beatrice is fairly certain that all of Italy knows whose money is filling the Italian League's pockets, not to mention the pockets of the kings of France and Germany. Though Ludovico is making the secret alliance against France, publicly he still sides with the French, and has just loaned Charles a large sum of money. When Beatrice had questioned him, he said, "It's important to make your enemies think that you are going to do one thing when you are really going to do another." "Well, you certainly have accomplished that," she replied. Ludovico had publicly denied his involvement in forming the Italian League all the way through the celebrations of the coalition at Venice, where the French ambassador had demanded to know why all the bells of the city were ringing, and why all the houses were alive with parties and talk of throwing the French out of Italy. "We know nothing about it," Ludovico's ambassadors had been instructed to say, "and whatever it is, we assure you that our Duke has no part of it." Beatrice decides to ignore Ludovico's question about whose money is going into what pockets. "What do you mean Francesco wouldn't speak with you about it? He was altogether charming all evening. I cannot believe that he would have slighted you on the celebration of your ascendance. If nothing else, he is no fool." A dark, jagged vein appears across Ludovico's forehead. Beatrice is not sure she has ever seen it before, but it makes him look meaner, older, and more malevolent. Apparently, he already spent all charm and civility on you and on whatever women were in proximity. When I asked him how the plans for marching south to confront the French were progressing, he stiffened. In that arrogant way of his, he said, "I am not going to fight the French. I am going to exterminate them." Then he had the audacity to walk away, as if I had insulted him. Perhaps you did. Perhaps he thought you were questioning his ability or his judgment in military matters. You are a great prince, Ludovico, but no soldier, after all. Or perhaps because he hears one thing about your allegiance to the French and then another about your new alliance with Venice, he is reluctant to speak openly with you. "Why are you taking his side against me?" Ludovico yells. "Have you no good opinion of me?" Beatrice cannot remember when he has raised his voice against her. Perhaps never. "I do not like this sniping at my sister and brother-in-law, who have only been loyal to you." What does he want from them? From anyone? "My lord, I do not understand why your mood is sour these days, when you are at the pinnacle of your success. You have assembled the most powerful alliance in Italy's history, backed by the greatest army we have ever seen." Ludovico does not answer her. Instead, he glares for a moment or two, throws up his hands, and leaves her rooms. She does not see him for 2 days. She finds out from the servants that Ludovico has gone to Vigevano to recuperate from the festivities. She pretends to know this information to stop whatever gossip is already circulating through the castello. Beatrice cannot imagine what she has done to him to cause this retreat. For years now he has looked to her for soothing and for companionship. Why has she become someone from whom he must flee? When he returns, he is at the brink of death. A terrified messenger drags Beatrice out of the bath, where she has gone to escape the heat of the afternoon. The Duke is sick and calling for the Duchess. He is on his way home, accompanied by Messer Ambrogio the astrologer. Prepare the rooms. "Is it the plague?" she asks, feeling her breakfast rise to the level of her throbbing heart. "No, it is something else," the man replies, turning his head away. She imagines from the sight of the unkept Duchess, wrapped hastily in a linen robe, watery hair springing out of its braid. Some strange fit brought on by bad news. I am not privy as to whatever that news is. Beatrice is so impatient to finish dressing that she kicks her leg backward, slapping her heel against the shin of the girl trying to tie her bodice. She hears Ludovico's party and flies into the hall, half-dressed, wet hair raining little streams of water down her back and into her bodice. Ludovico comes toward her, Messer Ambrogio and his assistant supporting him on either side. The Duke's garment is loose at the neck. Huge sweat stains mar the silky fabric beneath the arms. Spittle covers his chin and chest. "Hell yeah, brother. What's up, Julie?" His eyes roll wildly in his head. She notices that the left side of his body seems immobile, as if being dragged reluctantly behind the right. Indeed, the left side of his mouth appears frozen, making his mouth look like a half-moon being pulled apart. Beatrice throws open the door to his quarters, and the doctor places him on his bed. Ludovico moans. He does not speak to Beatrice, but tries to catch her attention with his eyes. He seems confused, as if struggling against something he does not understand. The doctor's assistant holds the Duke's head in his hands and pours a potion down his throat. Ludovico gags, trying to spit it out, but it appears that he cannot control his own tongue. Finally, he relaxes and lets the remaining liquid slide down his throat. I've given him something to calm him, Messer Ambrogio tells Beatrice. What is wrong? She asks. Has he eaten something foul? She is frightened to see her husband and lord in this condition, but some overarching pride does not allow her to reveal her emotions in front of this man whom she does not trust. There is something miserly of spirit about the doctor that manifests in his paltry physique. He is having a fit, one brought on by adverse news. I have seen this before in men of his age. He must rest. The doctor guides her away from the Duke's bed, while the assistant tries to soothe Ludovico with cool cloths to his face. What is this news? She asks. The doctor waits, perhaps assessing whether it is appropriate to entrust the Duchess of Milan with whatever secret he is guarding. Ludovico's moans provide a backdrop to the conversation. Beatrice feels herself getting more upset. I must remind you that I am my husband's regent, she says. Word reached us this morning that Louis, Duke of Orleans, has captured the city of Novara. But that is our city. That is not 20 miles from Milan. That is precisely correct. Louis staged a rather aggressive surprise offensive from Asti. He arrived at the gates with a huge army and gave the town council a choice. They could open the gates and accept him as the true Duke of Milan, since his grandmother was Valentina Visconti, or they could risk a full-scale assault on the city. Beatrice waits for him to finish the story. Naturally, they opened the gates. Ludovico seems to be slipping ever more deeply into unconsciousness. He waves his right hand at Beatrice, while his left lies limp at his side. He tries to speak to her, but the words come out like the offerings of the deaf beggars who perch in the city's corners. Her mind tries to process all this information at once. Her husband's illness, his desertion of her, Louis' claim over Milan, Louis' proximity to Milan. By now, the French King Charles must have gotten wind of the Italian League. The Italian army has already amassed and is preparing to march south. Surely Charles is aware that Ludovico, no matter how much he denies his involvement, is no longer France's ally. Perhaps Louis even acted on Charles's suggestion. In any case, Charles would no longer stand in the way of Louis invading Milan. And God help us if either man learns of Ludovico's weakened condition, she thinks. The French would be at the gates of the Castello in due haste. Beatrice remembers the story told by her mother and her sister of the night that the rebels broke in the Castello d'Este in Ferrara, trying to kidnap the royal family to take down Duke Ercole. She was just 1 year old and has no memory of this horror. By the time she was old enough to hear the story, all had long been made well. Her mother had acted wisely, ferrying her children to safety, and the brave Duke had arrived at home just in time to quash the rebellion and save his family. There is no mother or father or big sister now for Beatrice to turn to. She is the mother. Isabella is far away, and the Duke, who is supposed to rush in and save the day, lies grasping for words in his bed. I am reading a story. Yes, so we are reading Leonardo's Swans. We're quite far into the book at this point. This is all we've got left. But if you would like to catch up on all of the other readings prior to this one, you can go to my YouTube page, and I've got them all listed in sequential order. And you can actually see the other 2 stories that we've read so far. Sorry, darling, I'm already married. But you're more than welcome to sit and listen to me read. Excuse me. There is no mother or father or big sister now for Beatrice to turn to. She is the mother. Isabella is far away, and the Duke, who is supposed to rush in and save the day, lies grasping for words in his bed. Beatrice remembers how her mother's restrained dignity seemed to wrestle with her maternal pride whenever that story was told. She remembers the praise her father heaped on her mother for the courage she displayed in a time of crisis. Now it is up to Beatrice to make certain that when her children tell this story, they will not remember the terror, but will live to relate a happy ending to their children and their children's children. She wants to see the same admiration and gratitude in Ludovico's eyes when he, recovered, tells the story to others. She grabs Ludovico's right hand as it waves in the air, squeezing it. It is surprisingly cool to the touch. "I'll take care of it, my dear," she says to his frantic eyes, forcing herself to offer him a calm smile. She has her family locked inside the Rocchetta, that great sanctuary within the sanctuary of the Castello, with armed men to ensure that no one gets in or out. She sends messengers to each of the nobles, who just a week ago had publicly pledged their loyalty, asking them to assemble at the Castello without delay. She meets with them, delivering the news about Louis' aggression and sending them off to secure their areas of the city. When she is asked about Ludovico's whereabouts, she makes up a story on the spot. The Duke is meeting in secret with his generals to plan a counteroffensive. She summons Bernardino del Corte, one of Ludovico's oldest friends, who this winter was appointed warden of the treasury of the Castello. In Beatrice's own apartments in the Rocchetta, del Corte had sworn his lifelong fealty to the Duke and Duchess, and vowed with his very life to protect their assets. Now he repeats that pledge to her and rushes off to fortify the treasure tower in case of attack. She holds a meeting with the commander of the guard in charge of the 500 soldiers who protect the Castello around the clock, putting him on alert. She sends word to Galeaz, who is already on the move to Novara with a good-sized army. She calls for Bianca Giovanna, whom she keeps by her side so that the girl does not fall into panic, with her father ill and her husband heading a dangerous mission. She sends letters to their allies across Italy, and one to Emperor Max, explaining the treachery and asking for reinforcements to come to Galeaz's aid. If Galeaz is not able to contain Louis and his army, they will appear at the gates of Milan. What could hold back Louis' ambitions now? At night she sleeps with an arm around each of her sons, reminding her of how, as a girl, she used to sleep with 2 puppies to keep warm and to feel safe. Now she is taking precautions should she have to reenact Leonora's midnight flight from invaders. Bianca Giovanna, whose groom has been wrested by war from the marriage bed, insists on sitting by her father's bed late into the night, holding his hand and talking sweetly to him when he rouses from his slumber or his fits. The girl has begun to look fatigued, her preternaturally white and flawless skin taking on a pearlescent glow. After Ludovico falls asleep, some nights Bianca Giovanna goes to the family's private chapel at the Castello, praying until dawn for her husband. One morning Beatrice comes in at daybreak to say her prayers, finding the girl on her knees at the altar. She has not been to sleep. The tall tapers in front of which she kneels in prayer have burned down to the wick. Beatrice sees heavy circles resting like dark, sinister smiles under the girl's bleary eyes. "You must sleep, Bianca," Beatrice says. "What good will you be to your father or your husband or to me and the children if you wear yourself out?" "But I often spend the night in prayer," the girl confesses. "God has been so good to me. I was born illegitimate, but yet treated so tenderly and generously by my father after my mother passed away. He married me to the most gallant man in Italy. If I spend my life on my knees, could it be enough acknowledgment of our Lord's goodness?" The girl's earnestness was palpable. Not wishing to discourage her devotion, Beatrice holds out her hands to her, lifting her and sending her off to her room to sleep an hour or 2, promising to wake her if there is a change in Ludovico's condition. A week passes. Every day Ludovico improves slightly. He can almost squeeze his left fist again. Words come easier. General Bernard Contarini of the Venetian forces arrives in Milan with a mercenary army of 2,000 Greeks to help safeguard the city. Beatrice receives daily reports from Galeaz, who is skirmishing with the French at Novara's walls. Beatrice hides from Ludovico the content of the letters. Though we are able to hold Louis of Orleans inside the city of Novara, I am spending far too much time convincing my troops to refrain from deserting. Madam, they have not been paid in recent weeks, and it is getting increasingly difficult to rouse them to fight. The quartermaster himself has empty pockets and is threatening to join the other side. Beatrice speaks in secret with Ludovico's treasurer, Messer Gualtieri, only to be told that all the coin in the realm has gone to the Italian League army. As soon as they are victorious, the soldiers will be paid out of the bounty. She realizes that defeating the French now depends not only on the military ability of men like Francesco and Galeaz, but on their diplomacy in coaxing their armies to fight without salary, but for the promise of pay. A delicate situation, to be sure. Beatrice tracks Francesco's progress in the march south to confront the French army, which marches north. She receives a letter from Isabella saying that she is spending her days with the clergy at Mantua in prayer for Francesco's success in battle. The confrontation is imminent. The people of Naples have quickly tired of their new French occupiers. Pleasure-loving Charles, who is perceived by the Neapolitans to be as dumb as a plank, caring only about bedding beautiful women, and his army, who lie about drunk in the streets, raiding houses and women's bedrooms at will, taking whatever suits them. Charles apparently has read the writing on the wall. The Neapolitans began rioting against the French, so Charles gathered the bulk of his army and left town, leaving in charge an officer, the Duke of Montpensier, who is Francesco Gonzaga's brother-in-law. Meanwhile, the Duke's wife, Chiara, is being sheltered in Mantua by Isabella, who tells everyone that family is family, French and Italians be damned, and she will protect any member of her family if she chooses. Beatrice wonders if war will ever stop making strange bedfellows. Her sister shelters Chiara while Francesco marches on his brother-in-law's king. Francesco heads an army bought and paid for by his other brother-in-law and supported by the Venetians, who are now in Milan protecting Ludovico, who for decades had been their declared enemy. How will it end? Will it all end? Oh, yeah, Daisy, sorry. My YouTube name is Mimi, but if you go onto my bio here in TikTok and hit the little, camera icon, it'll show you my YouTube link, and it'll have Mimi next to it. I hope that helps. In the middle of the morning, Beatrice sits in her office wondering if and how she will govern the Duchy of Milan when the Italian and French armies clash, while the Duke who envisioned and funded the war lies in bed, an infirm man. Ludovico has continued to slowly improve, dressing daily and sitting for a time in the sun, but he is hardly in shape to command through a war. She is but 20 years old. She tries reminding herself that she is also the daughter of Ercole d'Este and the granddaughter of King Ferrante. If she must, she will be a wartime ruler. It is not impossible. History is littered with the names of such women, but would Beatrice d'Este actually join the ranks of Semiramis and Artemisia? Why not? Ludovico's cousin, Caterina Sforza of Forli, is always waging war upon one kingdom or another. At only 19, she took up the sword and led an army into the Castel Sant'Angelo in Rome. Still, the idea of ruling in Ludovico's stead at such a precarious time is making her ill. What if the Italian League army is not successful, and the French are soon bursting through Milan's gates? She pushes her untouched breakfast tray aside and looks up to see Leonardo the Florentine at the door of her office, holding a satchel, an expression of calm concern on his face. He looks as if he needs a good night's rest. Who let him in? "May I help you, sir?" she asks. Undoubtedly he is here to request another advance on the mural. "Your Excellency, I received a note from the Duke requesting a meeting on matters of weaponry and fortification, but when I arrived this morning I was told he was ill and not receiving visitors." "The Duke sent you a letter?" she asks incredulously. So it is a ploy to get more money, she thinks. Why else would he invent such a story? A note, written in his own hand, expressing concern over the safety of the Castello in the event of an attack. I entered his service originally as a military engineer and weapons expert. He is calling upon those skills these many years later. Why would Ludovico send for Leonardo when he will hardly see anyone at all? But Leonardo pushes the letter, which is written in her husband's hand, produces her husband's letter, which is written in his own hand. I am told it came through channels that would lead to his daughter, Madonna Bianca. Ah, that would make sense. Bianca Giovanna would be coerced into doing her father's bidding. Your Excellency, may I speak frankly? Leonardo asks. If you think it will be productive, Beatrice answers, dreading, as usual, what the magistro will have to say. I have personally dissected the tongue, and while I have found no muscles therewith intended specifically for gossip, that seems to be the primary exercise for that organ, at least at court. I see, Beatrice replies. Then you know of the Duke's condition? I do. You know that he is convalescing. Why, in his weakened condition, do you suppose he sent for you? He must have many thoughts locked inside his mind that he wishes to release. Magistro Leonardo, allow me to speak plainly. Of all people, you are aware of how conversations between yourself and the Duke can become rather heated. If something happened to disturb him, throwing him into another fit, we might lose him. That will not be the result of our meeting. Quite the opposite. Leonardo never looked more confident, at least in her presence. Have you taken to fortune-telling too? She asks, smiling. He looks for a moment as if he is trying to formulate an honest answer to her question before he acknowledges its humor with an appreciative smile. Then he speaks. Your Excellency, I have made an extensive study of the inside of the cranium for my book on human anatomy. I have seen the brain and how it is fed by arteries. I have witnessed the point of intersection of all of the senses. I have seen the locus of thought. God's genius is as evident in the alleys of this marvelous organ of the brain as in the rising of the sun or the birth of a child. You really should see for yourself its marvels. If I arouse the Duke's passion, whether positively or not, his heart will pump more blood, which will flood the brain and reawaken and revive it. The swift flow of blood through the healthy veins is key to longevity. None of this makes sense to Beatrice, of course. Her mind had seized upon the image of Leonardo dissecting a cranium, which then shut down her ears to anything else he had to say. But his methods could not be any worse than Messer Ambrogio's, who has lorded over his patient, switching the role between servant and master, and trying, in Beatrice's opinion, to drive a wedge between husband and wife. Besides, Leonardo frightened Beatrice, but she trusted him. She was not afraid of Ambrogio in the same way that she was afraid of the magistro, in that mysterious way in which one might be afraid of an angel or a ghost, though the ethereal creature would mean no harm. But she trusts the astrologer far, far less. So that at about the same time that she estimates Francesco Gonzaga and his army of 30,000 are colliding with King Charles on the banks of the Taro River near Fornovo, Beatrice takes the magistro to meet with Ludovico in his private drawing-room. The Duke is dressed, albeit rather simply, his lap covered with a wool blanket. He looks older since his last episode. His skin seems to have slackened, especially at the eyes and throat. To his young wife he looks more the father than the husband, but his vulnerability only strengthens her tenderness. The Duke shows no surprise when the magistro enters the room. In fact, he smiles broadly and thanks Beatrice for bringing the great man to him. The magistro asks nothing about the Duke's condition, but covers Ludovico's tables with sketches and architectural drawings of various kinds of walls and fortresses. The two put their heads together over the display, forming a barrier that excludes Beatrice from their communion. Beatrice leaves them alone to whatever games they are going to play. Perhaps a morning of Ludovico pretending that he is healthy and in control of the kingdom will bring about those very results. When she returns after 1 hour, Ludovico has yet more color in his cheeks. You must show the Duchess your invention, Ludovico says, pronouncing the words more slowly than before he had his fit, but with regained clarity. Beatrice steps over to the table, and Leonardo brings a wide drawing to the front of the castello, and its moat to the fore. He points to a series of windows that appear to float just above the water. It is a secret underwater bunker, Ludovico exclaims. The moat must be drained, of course, Leonardo says, but the chamber can be built rather quickly, and out of materials that will resist the water. An underground passage from the castello to the bunker will be built here. He points with his long finger. Manning the bunker will not be a problem. Only these windows will be visible above the water. Shooters can fire their weapons at eye level before the opposition will be aware of where the volley comes from. Needless to say, the men inside the bunker will be impervious to enemy fire. Beatrice finds that she is speechless. Leonardo and Ludovico look at her like two pups waiting for their treats after performing a series of tricks. It occurs to her that the two of them, with all their differences, are most often of one mind. The element of surprise is that which so often takes the day, Leonardo adds with complete confidence. Still, she cannot think of what to say. Perhaps this is a woman's folly, this inability to recognize what men of vision routinely see. Perhaps she knows even less of military matters than she previously assumed. She wished Isabella were here to pass judgment upon this fanciful thing the Magistro has presented. Beatrice can only think to ask how much it will cost, what kind of materials repel water, and whether it is wise, in times of war, to drain the moat. That is dazzling indeed, she says, the only response she can muster. Yet the new animation in Ludovico's face is undeniable. And that is not all, Ludovico says, looking conspiratorially at the painter cum weaponry wizard. The Magistro has alternative plans for defeating the French. Your Excellency, I have demonstrated to the Duke how we might burn the enemy en masse, flood them out, besiege them, or, in a last resort, repel their scaling ladders with fire and oil as they attempt to take the Castello, sending their scalding bodies plummeting one on top of the other to the ground. The men's faces are luminous, scenarios of destruction igniting fire in their eyes. Beatrice wonders how someone like Leonardo, who is known to be so sympathetic that he buys tiny sparrows in the marketplace only to set them free, who will not partake of the flesh of animals of any kind, and who has put creations of unmatched beauty into the world, can experience such joy in the destruction of whole battalions of human beings. I am surprised to find you so gleeful over these gruesome inventions, Beatrice says to both of them. How is it that an artist may so easily turn his creative nature toward destruction? Your Excellency, warfare is one of the greatest arts. What nobler pursuit than devising ways to preserve the lives of one's countrymen? Ludovico looks extremely satisfied with the Magistro's answer. Do come back to see me tomorrow. We will conspire the more, you and I. Beatrice walks with the Magistro to the door. Thank you for reviving my husband's spirits, she says quietly. It was not I, Your Excellency, but the magic that occurs when the blood is stimulated. When the Magistro leaves, Beatrice asks her husband if he needs to rest. Oh, not at all, he says. I am myself again. Ludovico reaches up to Beatrice, guiding her face toward his. To her disappointment, he kisses her forehead rather than her lips. Thank you for acting when I could not. Few men are blessed with such a wife. That is all the intimacy she receives, and she leaves his rooms feeling more puzzled and lost than before. For days and days, Beatrice looks out the window of the Rocchetta first thing in the morning to make sure that no one is yet draining the moat. What if Ludovico has lost his mind and starts to approve the Magistro's wilder schemes? What if the Magistro is indeed a conjurer who can take advantage of a man not entirely control of his faculties? What if Leonardo has been waiting for such an opportunity all along? What would be next? Beatrice imagines great heaps of coin being barreled out of the treasure tower to finance the building of giant wings for each foot soldier in the army. Would she have to sell her own jewelry to finance the efforts? Fortunately, news soon arrives that renders the aquatic bunker unnecessary. On July the 7th, a stifling day of hot sun and still air, Count Caiazzo, extraordinary knight and brother of Galeaz di San Severino, comes riding like the devil into Milan with a report from the battlefield. He tells Ludovico and Beatrice that the armies clashed with two great generals, Charles and Francesco, transformed into fierce warriors, each setting astonishing examples of valor and conviction for his troops. Francesco fought relentlessly, while 3 horses were killed beneath him. Charles's men were exhausted and suffering from heat stroke, their numbers diminished by constant desertion on the forced march from Naples up through the mountainous body of Italy. But the king rallied them with reminders of French honor, leading the charge time and again to inspire his troops. He kept crying out, "Die with me!" while he brandished his sword above his head, riding like a wild creature into enemy lines, the count says. You should have seen him on his white charger, with great purple and white plumes rising out of his helmet. I tell you, the king was transformed from a freakish little toad into a hero. Caiazzo went on to explain that by sunset it was difficult to declare who had taken the day, but Francesco managed to capture the French baggage train, replete with ammunition, weaponry, and a good deal of the French king's booty from Naples. The Marquis walked the battlefield in tears, looking at the bodies of his brave knights, some cousins, some friends from childhood, declaring a victory that was had at a tremendous price. I have never seen a man fight so well, or shed so many tears over fallen comrades. Charles and his army were horribly battered and reduced, but they escaped, and are headed for Asti as we speak. I am sure they have reached the city by now. Beatrice collapses in relief. Then my sister's husband is not wounded? With a few superficial scrapes, Your Excellency. It is a miracle. He said to tell you that he is sending some special trinkets from King Charles's tent to you for inspection. He thinks you will like them, though he is sure that you and your sister will fight over the best of it. Caiazzo's eyes glimmer as he reaches into his pocket, producing a small, bejeweled cross, which he places in Beatrice's hand. He folds her fingers over it, and then kisses her fist. This is just a hint of beautiful things to come. Where do these de San Severino men get their charm? Count Caiazzo looks so much like his brother, with the same insouciant wit and gallant manners, even after a long battle and a 2-day ride. If you see the Marquis, please tell him that the only loot I require from this war is his safety. I am sure that this is true as well of my sister. Ah, but I believe that the very sword and helmet of Charlemagne are among his prizes. But why did he let the French escape? Ludovico asks impatiently. Charles could be on his way to Milan for all we know. Count Caiazzo does not like the implicit accusation against a man who risked his life from a man who has not. Beatrice can tell. She knows all of Galeazzo's facial expressions and what they mean. She is familiar with this very one now replicated on Caiazzo's face: surprise, indignation, and a flash of anger. The Marquis cost the French army a river of blood. He decimated their ranks and captured their supplies. It was a starving band of stragglers and their king that escaped. The Marquis would have annihilated them altogether but for a large company of Albanian mercenaries, who disobeyed his orders and, instead of attacking, left the battle to plunder the French camp. This betrayal cost him much grief, but it was not his fault. I cannot imagine a man acting with greater courage on your behalf, Your Excellency. Not to mention rallying soldiers who have not been paid, Beatrice wishes to add, but does not. Still, Ludovico paces, mumbling that the French remain in Italy, and it was Francesco's mission to force them out. Beatrice is grateful when Bianca Giovanna flies into the room, flinging her arms around the Count. Beatrice knows that Bianca is doing this because she longs to embrace her husband, who is still holding back the Duke of Orleans at Novara. Caiazzo is a reasonable substitute, looking enough like Galeazzo to fill the girl with the idea that her husband is just as safe at this moment as his brother. If only I could bring him a portrait of you just as you are at this moment, he would vanquish the French immediately, just to get back to you, Caiazzo says to Bianca Giovanna. She wears a dusky pink dress that makes her seem to float on a soft cloud. Will you see him? The girl asks, intertwining her delicately veined white arm with the Count's muscular, burnished one. I am going to join my brother at the walls of Novara. I've only stopped here to feed the men and let them rest a day or two, and then we will be off. Will you give him this? She slips a thick letter into Caiazzo's big hand. There is so much I want you to tell him for me. Words are not everything, my dear, Caiazzo says to Bianca Giovanna. He knows the longing you are feeling, and believe me, he feels the same. I'm happy to hear that you're not lingering in Milan, Ludovico says. We cannot afford to let the French be so close to our border. I know my duty, Your Excellency, he replies solemnly. Solemn, but without the devotion that Beatrice would like to hear. After a very brief visit with his wife in Mantua and a ceremony in Venice to honor his extraordinary courage, the Marquis will be joining us at the siege of Novara, though he will barely have had time to catch his breath. Caiazzo bows formally, a little too formally for Beatrice's taste, taking his leave. She does not like the look on his face as he departs. She cannot help but think that it is some kind of warning. Beatrice has seen the pageantry and glory of a great army, and now she is a witness to its devastation. She puts her handkerchief over her nose against the stench of sickness and death. The cost of war is this: the dead and dying who lie rotting by the side of the road as she and Ludovico ride away from the city of Novara. The sight and sound of young soldiers retching and wailing make her ashamed of the victorious feelings she had basked in just a month, when the very army responsible for this wreckage had paid tribute to her. In August, she had accompanied a rejuvenated Ludovico to Novara, where Galeazzo had been laying siege since mid-June. Reinforced by Caiazzo and his cavalry, Francesco Gonzaga and the Italian League army, and a company of Swiss mercenaries sent by Emperor Max, put on a grand display for the Duke and Duchess of Milan. Italy's great condottiere donned glimmering armor for the occasion, carrying their flags and colors. Musicians played the music of battle. Drums pounded and trumpets blared as the men paraded, brandishing their weapons in the air. Beatrice had never seen such a show of swords, jousting, lances, crossbows as tall as a man, shining daggers, and guns dragged by horses on wheels. The procession stopped long enough for the guns to be fired, demonstrating their power. Beatrice put her hands over her ears and shut her eyes as balls of fire and smoke shot out of the long barrels, landing with great thuds. Galeazzo and his men carried all of Ludovico's banners, which seemed to Beatrice more magnificent than the colors of either Venice or the Holy Roman Empire. She was so proud as both Galeazzo and Francesco paid her special tribute. Everyone whispered that not since the days of the Roman emperors had Italy raised such an army. Beatrice let that glory wash over her. She knew the part she had played in the orchestration of this crowning moment. Ludovico was the prince who had financed and assembled this great force, the result of his efforts to forge the former rivals into alliances of the Italian League, and she was the wife who kept the kingdom alive while Ludovico lay incapacitated during his illness. She felt that both she and Ludovico deserved the honor bestowed. If not for them, King Charles would have marched the length of the country. Instead, while he was fighting the League forces at Fornovo, her cousin, Prince Ferrante, slipped back into Naples and restored order. Now the French army was in tatters, trying to make its way out of Italy, and Louis's forces were starving inside the very walls of Novara upon which her eyes were resting. She imagined that Louis and the French were cowering inside those walls, getting reports from their spies about the strength and grandeur of the Italians, and making plans to surrender. It was a perfectly wonderful day, except at the end of the procession, as Ludovico rode through the ranks inspecting the troops, his horse tripped, throwing him to the ground, and all his lovely clothes were spoiled. Beatrice worried over this setback, especially because of his recent health crisis, but he did not let the incident spoil his spirits, despite the fact that some snide Venetians started to spread the rumor that his fall was a bad omen. The next day, satisfied that the situation in Novara was under control, Beatrice and Ludovico rode to Vigevano rather than endure the summer heat in Milan. Though it was warm, the country air was fresh and clear. The spectacle at Novara seemed to revive Ludovico's spirits, and his desire for his wife. Beatrice was not sure exactly what had triggered the return of his affection, but she quickly remembered the bliss his attention could bring her. For one long week, they relived the earlier days of their marriage, when he had discovered her charms. They indulged in the pleasures of country life, riding, hunting, fishing, and taking big meals out to the riverbanks where they ate slowly, drank white wines cooled by blocks of ice brought down from the Alps, and one day even read the sweet love poetry of Petrarch to each other. While taking their naps in the tent set up for them after lunch, Ludovico had made love to her as the fabric fluttered around them. At the end of September, word reached them that Charles was weary of war and had sent Philippe de Commines, the French ambassador to Venice, to negotiate a truce with the Marquis. Ludovico and Beatrice rushed back to Novara, where King Charles had already arrived. They settled into a castle at Cameriano, a very short distance from Novara, where ambassadors arrived from all the allies of the Italian League to discuss the terms of the truce. Beatrice was especially proud that Ludovico spoke with the French on behalf of all parties, including her father, who came late in the week from Ferrara. She herself spoke several times in the meetings, reinforcing whatever point Ludovico was trying to make, particularly that he was anxious only to recover Novara and to escort the French out of Italy, and, of course, for Charles to force his trouble-making cousin Louis to drop his claims to be Duke of Milan. But Louis, starving yet unflinching inside Novara's walls, was begging Charles to break off negotiations with Ludovico and the Italians. As the week progressed, all the other ambassadors wanted to separately discuss Charles's terms with their governments, which Ludovico allowed would take months. So he met privately with Charles and negotiated his own settlement. Louis of Orleans has no claim to my title, Ludovico said. May I remind you that his grandmother was a Visconti? Charles replied in his cousin's defense. And may I remind you that there are thousands of bastards all over Europe with Visconti blood, but we do not seem to be investing them with the Duchy of Milan. Beatrice interrupted before Charles could reply. Your Majesty, let us remember that it is peace we seek. Louis's claims over the Duchy of Milan are an impediment to peace, which is simple to negotiate once it is truly desired. We desire peace, as does your Majesty. In the interest of peace, Louis must be dissuaded from making his claim. Charles responded at once, not only to her words, Beatrice was sure, but to her charms. I am weary of it all, your Excellency, he replied, smiling at her. My wife informs me that there are no French reinforcements left, only widows mourning the whitening bones of their husbands that cover the Italian countryside. He concluded the negotiations at once, urging that all papers of agreement be drawn up immediately, both in French and Italian, before he had cause to change his mind. Beatrice's triumph was not even spoiled when, later, she overheard the French king asking one of the ambassadors from Ferrara about Isabella. Was it true, he asked, that there was another Este sister who might resemble the lovely Beatrice in looks of charm and grace? In looks and charm and grace? Is it even possible that there are two such creatures on earth? The king asked, to Beatrice's delight. The ambassador replied that in truth the Marchesa was even more beautiful than the Duchess, surpassing all ladies in education, wit, and charm. He went on for a very long time, describing Isabella in great detail, down to her figure, and the dresses, jewels, and sleeves that adorned it. Then he extolled her intellect. She has governed Mantua through this war, and with wisdom and compassion, they say, all the while learning new languages and beautifying her city. She is the inspiration of artists and poets throughout Italy. She speaks perfect Latin, and plays the lute as well as the finest musician. She sings angelically, I might add. Is she not too tall? Asked the diminutive Charles. No, she is taller than her sister, but of normal height for a woman, the ambassador replied. Thank God for that, the king said. The courtiers of Italy call her the first lady in all the world. She sounds like a vision of perfection. Why, your Majesty, I do believe you are in love with her very description. It was true, Beatrice thought. Isabella was more beautiful and more brilliant than she. But those facts, and the French king's possession of them, could not alter her present happiness. Not only had peace been achieved, but her husband would be known as the prince who ran the French out of Italy, and that prince was once again in love with his wife. She sloughed off his rough demeanor for months before as a result of his illness. He was kind and attentive again. As a reward for her strength when he lay ill, Ludovico had commissioned Magister Leonardo and Donato Bramante to refurbish her apartments in the Castello. Both she and the Duke were anxious to return to Milan to see the results of this collaboration between the two brilliant talents, to cover their little boys with kisses, and to proclaim the peace they had achieved on behalf of their people. In addition to all this, Beatrice was pregnant again. Her time with Ludovico at Vigevano had been more fruitful than she'd imagined. She tells him on the night before they leave, and he is thrilled. "What is your best guess, my darling? Boy or girl?" he asks. "You do not even have to consult the astrologer, my dear. I know it in my bones. Our 2 sons will have another brother." Ludovico does not look as pleased as Beatrice would like. "Boys grow up to be envious of their father's power. Girls love their father forever," he says. "But you already have one perfect daughter in Bianca Giovanna," Beatrice replies. "Yes, but her handsome husband has supplanted me in her heart, as it should be. It would be nice to have another daughter to love me into my old age." "That is what I am here for, my lord," Beatrice replies. With the peace signed, Francesco and Galeaz and their troops open the gates of Novara to escort the French out of the city. Beatrice and Ludovico ride in their wake, slowly becoming cognizant of the horror they are to witness as they overtake the fallen army. The French soldiers have no horses. "All were eaten during the siege," Galeaz tells Beatrice when she asks him why they are being made to walk to the border. She estimates that few will actually live to see their homeland. A band of 50 or so, dressed in rags, lingers by the road, leaning on one another to sit upright. Beatrice is astonished to see the ambassador Comines help his staff to feed a clear broth to the soldiers. She sees that most of them are too weak to swallow, broth trickling down their slack mouths, and she turns away. But the view ahead is not pleasant. Dozens, finally in possession of some food given them by Charles's staff, simultaneously gorge and retch. Starved for so long, Beatrice imagines their bellies are rebelling against the nourishment. Young men drop as they walk, their companions too weak to look back at them, with much less help them along. Finally, Beatrice's party passes the entirety of the French army. As they ride away, she can hear the sounds of the men, crying, sobbing, heaving, gagging, linger in her wake. I'm going to read for just a little bit longer. I think I'm going to call it at about an hour today. Beatrice's eyes trace the whirring path of looping golden rope entwined through the boughs of branches that make a painted canopy of jungle on the ceiling of her drawing room. "A bower for my bower," she thinks, smiling at her own cleverness, then realizing that the magistro had probably conceived and executed the little joke for her pleasure. Massive tree trunks shoot up from the arched curves of the walls, roots upending the layers of rocks that try to confine them, as if to say that the outbursts of nature cannot be contained. The greenery spreads like an eternal summer, sheltering the entire room in one endless grove. Each leaf, indeed, each vein in each leaf, is painstakingly delineated with precise, delicate lines. The branches, like the gold ribbon that winds through them, writhe together in an everlasting pattern like an orgy of snakes. Bits of sky, blue, violet, pink, white, gray, made with swirling brushstrokes that mimic the movement of clouds, gleam through the tangle. But it's the plaited gold ribbon that puzzles. Unending, unbroken, elusive, it slips through the vividly painted leaves, around the thick bark, and then loops and loops around itself in eternal, torturous twists. Just when Beatrice thinks that the meaning of the mural is eternity itself, the entire landscape comes to a conclusion where, it appears, the painter put down his brush. "Oh, it's a cat. What are you doing?" "It is spectacular," Beatrice says. "Monumental. Overwhelming. But it is unfinished." "Ah, yes, the specialty of the magistro," replies Ludovico. "Another unfinished spectacle." Messer Gualtieri, the treasurer, comes with the letter and the bad news. Like the boisterous roots in his mural, the magistro has had an outburst. He was standing on the scaffold, Gualtieri begins, touching up a portion of the sky, when someone from his household arrived. I believe the boy asked for money. The magistro threw his brush into the air and started screaming that he was not a bank, that he had creditors chasing him, and that the boy should get used to wearing woolen breeches instead of leather, because they were all going to have to start economizing. Gualtieri pauses. Well, he called for some paper and wrote this. Gualtieri hands Ludovico a letter of folded parchment. He struggled over the words, Your Excellency. He wrote slowly, as if in great pain. Ludovico mumbles as he reads the magistro's words. Beatrice leans over to read the contents for herself. To your lordship, I regret being in need at this time because it prevents me from obeying your every whim and desire, which has always been my greatest pleasure. I regret very much that, having called upon my skills, you find me in need of the funds of which you have promised me. And I regret further that because these funds have not been delivered, I must leave your service and find other means of feeding myself and my household, which at the time numbers 6 mouths. In the last 56 months, I have received from your treasury only 50 ducats. Some creditors may be put off with the usual excuses, but I have had to advance the money to the priest and the processioners at the grave and the gravediggers to see my dear mother put to eternal rest in hallowed ground and with the proper rituals and holy sacraments. Therefore I must leave your lordship's service for a time, a very sad time for me, I assure you, to be separated from my greatest desire, which is to serve you, so that I might commence to raise the money necessary to keep my household fed and in breeches. I hope and trust that this period will soon come to an end, so that we might finish the projects we began in earnest. I especially look forward to executing the murals I designed of you portrayed as Fortune's son, driving out the decrepit hag, Poverty, with your golden wand, of your personage representing wisdom, wearing magical spectacles that enable you to see through all lies and deceit, and of your excellency wearing judicial robes and pronouncing sentence on envy. I believe that this series will present your lordship to his people in a manner in which his benevolence toward them and his desire for naught but their happiness and prosperity should already convey. Your excellency is familiar with my sorrow over the fact that Bramante has been given the time and funds to complete his series of frescoes of you administering justice, whereas I have yet to have the tools of time and money delivered to me. Further, I am anxious to test the designs for the canal locks. As you know, I have devoted many years to the study of the flow of water, and I am completely certain of this new system of control. As for the mural of the Last Supper, I would like to finish it, but as you know, I have not been able to find an appropriate model for the face of Judas, nor have I received the compensation to resume work. I will finish this and the portrait of your illustrious family when the finances I raise from other commissions enable me to return to your service. At that time, I pray that the Duchess will sit for me, as I wish only to work from the subject and not from another artist's rendering. Of the casting of the horse, I will say nothing, knowing what circumstances are at this time. One does wish, however, to some day complete one's grand opus. Forgive me for removing myself from my greatest happiness, which is to serve and obey you. Leonardo. I have not decided on the next books yet, but I will scour my library and figure out the next 3. Soon you guys will get a video about that. Ludovico throws the letter into the air. Does he think he's the only artist in Italy? He screams at Gualtieri. Where is Pietro Pergorino working? Send him a letter immediately. Write to my sister-in-law and have her send old Mantanega at once. Send to all the states and find out who is available. I will not have my ambitions held hostage by the magistro. But, my lord, why can we not simply give him the money he requires to return to our service? Beatrice asks. It seems a simple enough request. The money to feed and clothe oneself and one's dependents. Why wait for another artist to travel to Milan when, for just a little money, we can persuade the magistro to finish my rooms? Ludovico's cheeks puff wide as if he is about to blow some huge thing from his mouth. The vein, which Beatrice has seen before, jagged as a lightning bolt, appears abruptly across his brow. Beatrice wonders if he, like angry Zeus, will pull it right out of his head and throw it at her. What? And play into his hands? This is exactly what he wants. More money so that he can procrastinate until Judgment Day and not have finished a single thing. She prays that her husband does not fall into another fit over this, but she feels she must remind him of certain realities. I do not understand how paying the man is playing into his hands. You sound as if you are talking about a conniving lover, and not a man in your service. She has long likened the two of them to a married pair. Would the analogy never wear itself out? His fury is undeterred. "Do not think that you are innocent, madam," he says. "If you had not been playing silly games with your sister over the magistro's attention, you might have sat for the family portrait long ago, and we would have at least one finished work for all our money, one that would bring glory to the family at that." "If it pleases your excellency, I will sit for the magistro immediately. I am sure that he can hide my condition. It is not yet so pronounced." Whatever will calm her husband, Beatrice will agree to at this moment, when she fears he is aggravated enough to evoke a fit, and she, pregnant, will have to govern the kingdom at a time when peace with France is fresh and tenuous. How convenient! Now that you are willing, he is unavailable. Was she wrong to have tried to beat Isabella at her own game? My sister wanted the attention of my husband. If it had merely been a question of being painted by the magistro, of course I would never have stopped her. But my husband reserves the talents of the magistro for painting the women he loves. I could not allow my sister to join those ranks, not when court gossip was prevented. Silences the tongues of its detractors. Don't you see, my lord? Everything I have done since coming to this court, I have done for you. She says it tenderly, waiting for the simple truth to wash over him. She would like to add, "and to make you love me." But she is glad that she refrained, because her words do not soothe him at all. Rather, he looks at her strangely before turning away and continuing his tirade. "Oh, he is maddening," Ludovico says, as if talking to the trees Leonardo painted on the walls. "Who has fed him and kept him in his fancy brocades and velvets all these years? Am I to receive no gratitude from anyone?" Ludovico seems angered that Leonardo's tangle of leaves offers him no answer. Frustrated, he walks out of the chamber, leaving his wife behind as if he had forgotten altogether that she had been with him. All right. And we'll bring that to a close this evening. All right. Thank you all so much for listening to me read this evening. Again, I am sorry about Tuesday. Completely just lost track of time. I will do my best to not let that happen again. So we will resume again on Tuesday, same time, 8 o'clock to maybe 9:15, depending. But until then, have a fantastic weekend. Keep yourselves safe, keep yourselves hydrated, and I will see you next week. Bye.